you have a question? Yes, go ahead.
It's another thing I saw in this. Trump still reflecting from this impending impeachment.
Right.
Decided that kids can't have prayer in school.
Really? That's a new one on me. It, yeah, it started off by the woman in Ohio. She was the one who pushed that many years ago. If you remember that. Yeah.
She was atheist.
Say it one more time. Yes. And she was one that pushed it and became a big deal. But here's why I'm kind of a little bit stunned, because when the president now says it, it's like you're adding more emphasis to it. Because if he turns right now and reinforces it, and what are they going to do? And they love Trump already. They're going to start to follow it.
Pray for him. He wants them to pray for him.
Yeah. Pray for me. I'm the devil. Pray for me. That's what people are about. Trump is the devil. He's the devil. All right. Let's get into the teaching. He's the devil. Let's say it one more time.
He's the devil.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, the teaching we're going to be dealing with today, it's not going to be very long, but I want you to make a note. It is The Invention of Esau is the title. The Invention of Esau, an introduction to the wicked. That's the subtitle. So the main title is The Invention of Esau, subtitle, an introduction to the wicked. Let's go, if you please, to the book of Job, where it mentions the earth is given into the hands of the wicked. Go ahead.
It's the book of Job, chapter 9 and verse 24. The earth is given into the hand of the wicked. He covereth the faces of the judges thereof. If not, where and who is he?
So let's read it again really slow. And we're going to make this teaching this morning a teaching that is reciprocal in terms of feedback. Feel free to ask and interrupt, because we're going to use it as a history lesson to a certain degree. It says, the earth is given into the hand of the wicked. Then it says, he covereth the faces of the judges thereof. Now, when it makes that statement, most time people would read that and think, well, it's speaking about the judges being people like themselves, or people that are in a judiciary position. But really what it's speaking about when it uses the word judges, it's speaking of Israel, because Israel was the first of all of the nations to have judges. Remember, much of what the nations have picked up, they picked up from Israel. They have a Supreme Court today. That is really a spin-off from what many centuries have given them from the history of Israel, because Israel is the first nation to have judges. So it says, he covereth the faces of the judges thereof. If not, then where and who is he? If it isn't. To get an answer to that, I want us to go real quick to Genesis 36 and 1. Genesis chapter 36 and verse 1. Let's read.
Genesis chapter 36 and verse 1. It reads, Now these are the generations of Esau, who is Edom.
So it tells you that these are the generations. So if there is any misunderstanding from anyone who studied the Bible and they're trying to make out who is Esau, it says now, these are the generation of Esau, who is Edom. The word Edom means something else. Most people are saying that, well, it means his name or it's his surname. He's Esau Edom. I've heard that foolishness and I have to rebuke it. But then when we jump down to verse 8, watch what it says.
Verse 8. Thus dwelt Esau in Mount Seir.
So he dwelt in Mount Seir. Go on.
Esau is Edom.
Read.
And these are the generations of Esau, the father of the Edomites.
The father of who?
The Edomites.
So he's the father of the Edomites. Read.
In Mount Seir.
In Mount Seir. Now, it's clear to know as well that he is also, the words Seir here is also Shinar and so on, because it goes all the way back to Mesopotamia. Now, if we jump down, if you please, to verse 12, let's read that for a quick moment.
Verse 12. And Timah was concubine to Eliphaz, Esau's son.
Esau's son, continue.
And she bare to Eliphaz Amalek.
So now Amalek comes on the scene. Amalek that you're reading about here in the scriptures is the Amalek of today, who is called the Jewish people. They're the Jewish people. By the way, if you missed it, these were the people, again, so if anyone's online having a problem with this, don't blame me. Go and read the Bible. Begin at Genesis chapter 10.
That's right.
Because remember, the Most High God commanded Saul to go and wipe out all of the Amalekites. But he didn't do it. He was disobedient. And then he argues with Samuel and grabs Samuel. And as he grabs Samuel, Samuel's robe was torn, his mantle was torn. Now, you have to examine that more closely, because many of us said he grabbed his mantle and it tore. Well, hold on a moment. Samuel would have to be a very large and heavy man for him to wear a garment that someone like Saul would grab a hold of and pull it and not pull him down, because their garments wasn't flimsy. This is Israel. Their garments were made out of single materials. They weren't mixed materials, because it was part of our law that we use single materials. Can't? So bear this in mind as well. If the mantle tore, it means then that the Most High God put a strength and a rigidity in Samuel that even the likes of Saul could not pull it off of him or hold him back. Remember, Saul was a giant of a man. I mean, he was, scripture said he was head and shoulders above all of Israel. So this was a man of great stature, which is, by the way, is the stature of how all our people in the kingdom to come will be. And so when we read this now, his mantle gets torn. Why? Because he lets the Amalekite live. But when we go back to verse 12, and let's finish it, please. It said these were
Genesis chapter 36, verse 12. These were the sons of Adah, Esau's wife.
Read on.
And these are the sons of Ruel, Nahath, and Zerah, and Shema, and Mizah.
Good. So from there, jump all the way down to verse 15 for time purposes.
Verse 15. These were dukes of the sons of Esau.
So he made them Jews. He made them of a royal decree. He wanted to have an elitist society that was formulated with his name. But again, you would have to ask the question, is that not what goes on even today? When we look at the Rothschilds, who, by the way, are the descendants, are they not considered to be like dukes, great men of power? position, and wealth.
Right.
And some of them are more powerful, or most of them, I should say, not some, most of them are more powerful than countries and presidents of countries. You see, remember, it was JFK who turned round and leaped the cat out of the bag and said, "You thought that I was in control."
That's right.
He leaked it and said, "But there are forces beyond me that's in greater control than I." And I believe, if my memory serves me right, he made that statement when he paid a visit to Ireland and he had to give a speech there. And it's funny how he would do it there, because that's where the Rothschilds are, of an island in the UK. So really, he was almost opening up an open war on those powers that were trying to control him. And then you begin to say, that explains then why they had to rub him out of the way.
That's right.
Because either you comply or you get destroyed.
That's right.
In fact, it was the Borg in the Star Trek film who said, resistance is futile. All right, so let's go back and finish that verse.
Yes, sir. Genesis chapter 36, verse 15. These were dukes of the sons of Esau, the sons of Eliphaz, the firstborn son of Esau.
Read.
Duke Teman, Duke Omar, Duke Zepho, and Duke Kenaz.
Jump from there. In fact, let's continue because that's important.
Verse 16, Duke Korah, Duke Gathman, and Duke Alamach.
See, even Amalek there, he's a duke as well, a king, so to speak. Now, jump down to verse 19.
Verse 19, these are the sons of Esau, who is Edom, and these are their dukes.
Okay, so now you are seeing, let's make it very clear. These are the sons of Esau, who is Edom.
That's right.
It has said it 3 times
That's right.
to drive the emphasis that there is no mistake in this. Khan? All right. So, since we've looked at that, let's quickly go to 2nd Ezra, chapter 6 and verse 8.
In the Apocrypha, page 20. 2nd Ezra chapter 6 and verse 8, it reads, And he said unto me, From Abraham unto Isaac, when Jacob and Esau were born, were born of him.
Read.
Jacob's hand held first the heel of Esau, for Esau is the end of the world, and Jacob is the beginning of it that followeth.
So, let's read that a little bit slower now to put it in clear context. Read, sir.
2nd Ezra chapter 6, verse 8. And he said unto me, From Abraham unto Isaac, when Jacob and Esau were born of him.
So Jacob and Esau were born of him. Hold that briefly. Let's go to Genesis chapter 25. And let's begin, if you please, at verse 23. Let's begin at verse 23.
Genesis chapter 25 and verse 23. And the Lord said unto her, 2 nations are in thy womb.
So it's now making a prophecy, a prophetic statement. He says 2 nations are in your womb. Again, the reason why you have to look at that carefully is because if 2 people are brothers, 2 men are brothers, they're not 2 different nations.
Mm-hmm.
If we're brothers and we come from the same father, then we are the same nation.
That's right.
Right?
Right.
Now, how do we know this? We know this because when we look and study Jacob having 12 sons, notice all 12 sons did not come from all the same mothers. Same father, different mothers. Yet the Bible calls them one nation.
That's right.
See? So if 12 can be called one nation, why is it now we're reading here in Genesis chapter 25 And verse 23, it says, read again, sir.
And the Lord said unto her, 2 nations are in thy womb.
So the Most High God said to her, spoke into her spirit, you have 2 nations in you. That must have been perplexing to her because, hold on, I've only known Jacob. I've known 6 and 7 different men. I've only known this one. And now you're telling me there's going to be 2 nations in me? And plus, watch it, they are twins. How do you get 2 nations from twins? And notice, this is the Most High God speaking this.
That's right.
Now, when we read on,
And 2 manner of people.
2 manner, the word manner always speaks about difference. That's why in the book of Revelation it says, and on the tree there were different manners of fruit.
Come.
Read.
2 manner of people shall be separated from thy bowels.
So 2 types of people are going to be separated from thy bowels. Read.
And the one people shall be stronger than the other people.
The one people who are going to be stronger is Jacob. The reason why I have to keep on putting emphasis on that is because with the way that Jacob has been destroyed over the centuries, thousands of centuries, it's surprising he's still here. Whereas other nations have been destroyed and they haven't come back.
Yeah.
But read.
Verse 24. And when her days.
And the elder.
Salaki. And one people shall be stronger than the other people. And the elder shall serve the younger.
The elder shall serve the younger. So the elder, who is Esau, we'll find out, will serve the younger, which is Jacob. Jump to verse 25 for time purposes.
Verse 25. And the first came out red all over like a hairy garment.
Like a hairy garment. Notice here, it is showing what he looks like. I don't know. I'll do that another. Hold on a moment. Bear with me just one moment. Let me see if I have something that I could. No, I didn't bring it. All right, because I have a picture, and I'll show it to you down the road. It shows 2 twin babies. One dark skin, and the other one like an albino, and he has ginger hair, and he looks exactly like his brother. By the way, they're identical twins. These ones I'm talking about. And here's the thing: they look like night and day. Same mother, same father. And bear in mind, in the history, and someone's going to come and send me an email and say, I found something, then good for you. But in history, you will find that 90% of the times that you can get someone of a lighter hue coming out of a black family. You cannot get that coming out of Esau. Esau doesn't produce that because it's not in them to do the same way as it is with us. All right, time purposes, let's go back. Let's read that, please. And it said,
Genesis chapter 25, verse 25. And the first came out red all over like a hairy garment.
Read.
And they called his name Esau.
Called his name Esau. The word Esau in the Hebrew means Isashawa. Isashawa. It means he is wasted away. He's wasted away. He has no color. He looks dead because that's what babies that are dead look like, according to the scriptures. Gone? All right. So let's go back, if you please, to 2nd Ezra chapter 6 and verse 9. In fact, let's read the latter clause, which is, it says, when Jacob and Esau were born.
Come. 2nd Ezra chapter 6 and verse 8, latter clause. And when Jacob and Esau were born of him, Jacob's hand held first the heel of Esau.
That's prophetic. That means dominance.
Right.
It means control. It means conquering. So it shows you that ultimately Jacob is going to have control and dominance. Read verse 9.
Verse 9. For Esau is the end of the world.
So there's a comma there. And the reason why you've got to read it carefully is because it's trying to let you know the end of the world is coming because of Esau.
Come.
That's really what it's saying. Go on.
And Jacob is the beginning of it that followeth.
And Jacob is the beginning of a new age that will follow.
That's right.
Oh, that's so sweet when I read that.
That's right.
Let's just jump down, if you please, time purposes. No, let's leave that for just for a quick moment. Now, is there any questions that anyone has so far? Remember, I want to keep this kind of like a Q&A to some degree. Any questions? None? Yeah, I see two. All right, go ahead. I'll take you first.
Back when you were talking about Saul, Saul carried a lot of weight
Yes.
in the history of Israel,
Yes.
more so than a lot of people even have given him
Credit for.
credit for.
Yes.
Why do you think that is? Why did Saul have so much power?
Well, part of the reason was because he represents a type of Yahushai. If we go to 2nd Ezra chapter 2 and verse 43, why does Saul carry more weight than he gets credit for? Well, because his whole demeanor, the way that he was, it was a reflection of what Yahushai would be. And so when we read this now in 2nd Ezra chapter 2 and verse 43, read, sir.
2nd Ezra chapter 2 and verse 43. And in the midst of them there was a young man of a high stature, taller than all the rest, and upon every one of their heads he set crowns.
So it's showing you that here it's speaking about Yahushua, it's speaking about him who the world calls Jesus. He, when he returns, he's going to be a tall young man, and he's going to be an outstanding figure. Bear that in mind with the story of Saul. He was also a tall man, towered above the rest. And so as a kingly figure, he befits it. He stood out from the rest. You just read here that Yahushua did the same thing also. He stood out. But not only that, remember this. He was a man that the scripture says the Most High used him to prophesy. So when you read the story of Saul, you'll read where he prophesied. He continued to speak prophetically. It was in him. But his weakness was that he was disobedient. Disobedience is one of the biggest sins that we who are in the truth can commit. Disobedience. Because we are told that we must follow the law. When you don't follow the law, in fact, let's go to that, John. Everyone says that he's a liar. Second John. Yeah. So when we look at him, or look at a person who turns around and says, you know, I love the Lord and I do that, and yet you fail to do certain things within the scriptures, you have made yourself a liar. And the scriptures makes it plain when it says it, doesn't it? Yeah, first, yeah. All right, let's go to the book of 1 John, chapter 2, and let's begin at verse 3. The key verse is verse 4, and we'll stop at verse 6. Go ahead.
1 John chapter 2 and verse 3. And hereby we do know that we know him, if we keep his commandments.
So if you say you know him, then you do what?
Keep his commandments.
You keep his commandments. Continue.
He that saith, I know him, and keepeth not his commandments, is a liar.
What is he?
Is a liar.
What is he?
Is a
He's
liar.
a liar. Go on.
And the truth is not in him.
And the truth is not in him. Go on.
But whoso keepeth his word, in him verily is the love of God perfected. Hereby know we that we are in him.
Go on.
He that saith he abide in him ought himself also to walk even as he walks.
So you can't say this without walking right. Jump quickly to 1 John 5, same book, chapter 5 and verse 3.
1 John chapter 5 and verse 3. For this is the love of God.
So if you say you love him, this is what love is. Go on.
That we keep his commandments.
Read.
And his commandments are not grievous.
They're not grievous. They're not hard. So you must be obedient to keep his commandments. Can? So that's our biggest problem, disobedience. Remember when the children of Israel, and to show you that it wasn't just in Saul, it was in the children of Israel, because when they left Egypt, they were supposed to keep the commandments and follow the laws and statutes, and guess what they did? They murmured, they complained, and they disobeyed. And so the Most High God had to do some destruction work by destroying some of them. So it is important to recognize that Saul was a very monumental figure. He wasn't lightweight, and for anyone that tries to make him out like that, you don't know the scriptures. He was indeed chosen by the Most High God for a reason. However, he failed, and once he failed, the Most High God turned himself from him, and then, remember, when the Most High God turns from you, then another spirit from the left-hand side now can come and enter into you and mess up your mind, and that's exactly what happened. That's why he started to become psychotic. You know, he kept on hearing voices. Who's that? What are they saying about me? He became delusional. And out of his state of delusion, he started to have hatred for the young man David. Yes. Answer your question. Do you have a question there? No? Anyone else? All right. Let's move forward now. What I want you to do, still staying where you are, go to 2 Ezra chapter 3. And we're going to read, if you please, verse 4. 2 Ezra chapter 3, and let's read from verse 4.
The book of 2 Ezra, chapter 3 and verse 4.
Still dealing with the invention of Esau and introduction to the wicked. Let's read.
O Lord, who bearest rule, thou spakest at the beginning,
Read.
when thou didst plant the earth, and that thyself alone, and commandedest the people.
Read.
And gavest a body unto Adam without soul.
So remember, when he was made, he didn't have a soul. What was the soul that is speaking about the scriptures? What is the soul that it's speaking about? When people read that, often they're thinking about it in the wrong stead. What is it saying? Come on. All right. Yes, ma'am.
Well, the scripture says that the Most High breathed into him, and then he became good as himself.
Good. So, when the Most High breathed into him, according to the scriptures, he made him a living soul, meaning he could now live according to the law of the Most High God. Is that what you said? So, well, if you're going to whisper it over there, I can't hear that, mate. All right? So it's good to speak assertively, all right? And remember, don't be afraid to get it wrong. Because if you get it wrong now, you get it right next time. Good. Well done. Good. Go to 2 Ezra chapter 6 and verse 54. Let's give a precept to what we just read.
It's the book of 2 Ezra, chapter 6 and verse 54.
Read.
And after these, Adam also, whom thou madest Lord of all thy creatures.
So he was king. Read.
Of him come we all, and the people also, whom thou hast chosen. All this have I...
Hold it. Read it again. Read the latter clause again. Of him.
Of him come we all,
come we all.
and the people also whom thou hast chosen.
So those who have been chosen come from Adam as well as the other people. But watch what it says. Read.
All this have I spoken before thee, O Lord, because thou madest the world for our sakes.
He made the world for our sakes. Khan?
Come.
Now, when we jump down a little bit further, all right, let's read 56 again. Go on.
56?
Yeah, 50. No, I want you to read 56. Go on.
Come. Verse 56. As for the other people, which also come of Adam.
So it's letting you know other people also came out of Adam. Right? The other people. Go on.
Thou hast said that they are nothing.
Then they're nothing. All right. Just want to stop there. Go back to 2 Ezra chapter 3 and let's read verse 5 again.
2 Ezra chapter 3 and verse 5. And gavest a body unto Adam
So gave a body to him. Go on.
without soul,
Without the commandments. Go on.
which was the workmanship of thine hands.
Read.
And didst breathe into him the breath of life.
Breath of life, which is the law, statutes, and commandments. Go on. Read on.
And he was made living before thee.
Read.
Verse 6. And thou leddest him.
Stop for a moment. So what does it mean, ladies and gentlemen, that he was made living before thee? What does that mean? It means then that he is alive because of what? Because of the laws. All right. Continue, sir.
Come. 2 Ezra chapter 3 verse 6. And thou leddest him into paradise. Salaki. Come. And thou leddest him into paradise, which thy right hand had planted, before ever the earth came forward.
Read.
And unto him thou gavest commandment.
Gave what?
Thou gavest commandment
See, the commandments was given to him. Read.
to love thy way,
Read.
which he transgressed.
Read.
And immediately thou appointedest death in him and in his generation.
So death is appointed because if you fail to keep the commandments, death is appointed unto you. Read on.
Of whom came nations, tribes, people, and kindreds out of number.
Out of Numbers 8.
And every people walked after their own will,
Read.
and did wonderful things before thee, and despised thy commandments.
Jump down to verse 12. Read.
Verse 12. And it happened that when they that dwelt upon the earth
Read.
began to multiply, and had gotten them many children, and were a great people, they began again to be more ungodly than the first.
Read.
Now, when they lived so wickedly,
So what?
so wickedly
Read.
before thee, thou didst choose thee a man from among them, whose name was Abraham.
So he's always looking for a man who is willing to take up the mantle and walk with it. Right?
Right.
Can't find many of those men these days. Go on. Read.
Verse 14. Him thou lovest, and unto him only thou showest thy will.
Jump to 16.
Verse 16. And unto him thou gavest Isaac, and unto Isaac also thou gavest Jacob
Read.
and Esau.
And Esau. Read.
As for Jacob, thou didst choose him to thee.
Hold it. Underline that.
God.
Unto Jacob, he chose him to thee.
That's right.
Read on.
And put by Esau.
And did what?
And put by Esau.
So when it said put by Esau, it means he put him aside.
That's right.
Put him aside. Go on.
And so Jacob became a great multitude.
Jacob became a multitude. Continue.
And it came to pass that when thou leddest his seed out of Egypt, and thou broughtest them up to the mount of Sinai, and bowing the heavens, thou didst set fast the earth, movedest the whole world, and madest the depths to tremble, and troublest the men of that age.
Read.
And thy glory went through 4 gates of fire, and of earthquake, and of wind, and of cold.
Read.
That thou mightest give the law unto the seed of Jacob.
Read.
And diligence unto the generation of Israel.
So the law was only given to Jacob only.
Come on.
No matter how many times you read this, and no matter how many times you tell people, they say, but he gave it to the whole world because there's a new bunch of people there. All right. So now that we have that, what I want to do is to bring about some further understanding. Go, if you please, now to that page that I have marked there. All right. Begin reading from the top.
The invasion of ancient Rome.
So now we're going to understand clearly, how did Esau come into the sea? Now we've built up, we've given a little foundation there just to get an idea. Now let's go. Read.
The North American Review. The North American Review.
Now the North American Review is a publication that has been in existence going back to the 18th century. Continue, sir. Read it completely.
Title completely. Volume 0139, issue 334, September 1884. Title, Our Remote Ancestry, pages 246 to 256. Author, Winchell Alexander, a professor. Collection, Journals, North American Review, 1815 to 1900. The North American Review, the most publication in England and the United States in the 1800s, had this to say about the black beginnings of Europe. The blacks came from Atlantis and Northern Africa. They built cities in Spain, Sicily, Rome, Gaul, and Britain long before the sack of Troy.
Stop now. Gaul, don't you answer it. Who or what is Gaul? What country or nation is that today? Go over it and repeat it again.
The blacks came from Atlantis and Northern Africa. They built cities in Spain.
And by the way, when people talk about Atlantis, Atlantis again is, the Greeks always like to claim it completely, but Atlantis was a piece of land that was connected both to the North America and to the Greekish area. And our people lived there for many centuries. Here's the thing. When they keep on showing these lying shows of Atlantis being so-called Caucasian people who lived there, and then the land itself was sunk to the bottom of the ocean, and these are the people who started the mermaids and all of that garbage. The real Atlanteans are us. Again, at some future point, we'll prove that when we set up a little bit more and we finish this place so we can have some screens going. But read what it says, continue from where you were.
They built cities in Spain,
Yeah.
Sicily, Rome, Gaul, and Britain long before the sack of Troy.
Right. Gaul is who now? Go ahead, tell me. France. The French are the Gauls. All right? It has been noted for years that the Sicilians are us. It has been noted that the original Romans are us. It has been noted for centuries that the people that were first in what they call now Great Britain are us. You and I have been taught history in the reverse. And unfortunately, because we're good little slaves, we teach our children the same thing, and then they pass it on, and the truth gets completely erased. Continue, please.
They were ruling in Sicily long before 2000 BC.
Make a note of that. Long before 2000 BC. So it was before the Common Era and before what is known before Christ, as people like to put it. But it's the Common Era. Go on.
It's one thing for me to tell you that Rome was originally a black nation, but it becomes huge when a white authority tells you the same thing. The original inhabitants of Rome were black Etruscans, and when
Hold it. Read it again. The original
inhabitants of Rome were the black Etruscans. And when the Latins, barbarians, white invaded Rome, they also record a dark age. It should be apparent to you that your schools are lying to you about the past. This attempt to cover up the black beginnings of civilization is an attempt to alter history. The prophet Daniel said, 7th chapter of Daniel, that the Antichrist would try to change times and laws.
All right, let's go there and let's read it.
Daniel chapter 7 and verse 25.
Good.
And he shall speak great words against the Most High.
Read it again.
And he shall speak great words against the Most High.
Read.
And shall wear out the saints of the Most High.
So, but in order to understand that, the saints of the Most High, he said, wear out the saints of the Most High. You have to know where it says in the scriptures that we are the saints. From there, you go where? To Psalms 148, begin at verse 1.
Psalms chapter 148 and verse 1. Praise ye the Most High. Praise ye the Most High from the heavens. Praise him in the heights.
All right, jump down to 14.
Verse 14. He also exalteth the horn of his people, the praise of all his saints, even the children of Israel, a people near unto him. Praise ye the Most High.
So it's telling you that the saints are the children of Israel, a people that is near unto him. So if it's making it that abundantly clear, then now you know who the saints are and who it's speaking about. Continue.
What are times, people? Times is nothing but history, and this is an attempt by the devil to try to alter the history of the world.
Go on.
I don't have any problem with the fact that whites have taken the dominion in these last days, and why should I? Blacks ruled the world from 4142 BC until the coming of Nebuchadnezzar in 609 BC.
Now, the reason why you have to also understand that is because, in fact, let's can we get some air conditioning going in here? Let's go and hit that for me, please. I think you could do with it too. So let's hit that up. So before that, you'll find that from the beginning, our people were the ones who were in major rulership. And when we go through the scriptures there, continue on just a little bit more for me.
Until the coming of Nebuchadnezzar in 609 BC.
Read.
Blacks have ruled sporadically worldwide after the Gentiles began to rule. So like the Italians say, it is what it is. My problem is the worldwide blackout of black history. My issue is with the white archaeologists, historian colleges, universities, coin dealers, sellers and buyers, churches and the government. These institutions are guilty of not teaching the truth to the people of the world. Timeline, 1100 BC.
All right. Any questions so far? All right. Let's take a question back there.
During this time, what language did we speak? Was it the language of that area, or were we at that time still speaking our language?
All right. You'll find that through a great part of our existence, before we became slaves to other nations, we still spoke our Hebrew tongue. We still spoke it. Even when we were scattered, we still spoke our Hebrew tongue. Because remember, the Hebrew tongue is a very powerful language. Very powerful indeed. That's why you'll find that in all of the languages of the earth, our tongue is found in their language. Then you will also find as well that in order to wipe out Hebrew completely, what did they do? They started to introduce more and more of their own language, such as the Greek and the Latin. That's what you find. Greek and Latin, for the most part, ruled in terms of a common language. And remember, the people who are in dominance, they are the people who make those who are slaves speak their language. Now, you all speak English, basically, right? You're speaking that because that's a byproduct of showing that you are indeed a slave. And even if you try to escape it and say, well, I'm not a slave, then why are you still speaking English?
I have a precept.
Go ahead.
I have a precept for Israel still speaking in Sicily, still speaking their native tongue in Sicily. Here in the book of Acts, chapter 22, verse 2, I'll start at verse 1. Men and brethren and fathers, hear ye my defense, which I make now unto you. And when they heard that, he spake in Hebrew tongue.
He did what?
He spake in the Hebrew tongue to them that kept the more silence. And he saith, I am verily a man which am a Jew, born in Tarshish.
Hold it a moment, doctor. Go back and say, I'm verily a man what?
I am verily a man which am a Jew.
I'm a what?
Am a Jew.
Go on.
Born in Tarshish.
Born where?
Born in Tarshish.
In Tarshish, which is considered to be kind of Spain. Go on.
A city in Sicilia, yet brought up in this city at the feet of Gamaliel, and taught according to the perfect manner of the law of the fathers, and was zealous toward God. And ye are all this day.
Right. So it shows you that the Hebrew language has been around for a long time. But now remember, the people who eventually killed our language, it was done on purpose. Because, and I was going to bring in the promise and the lost tribes of the promised land. In that, it speaks of a Frenchman, an Italian, and the page I want was where he spoke Hebrew. I can't remember what page it was, but it's when they discovered them. I need to give you my book so you can mark this up a little bit more. Let me just see if I can quickly find it. Bear with me just a quick moment, please. Just a quick moment. I'm always making reference to it. So in it, it speaks of the fact that they came across these people, and when they came across them, they greeted the tribes. They came through the Americas, by the way. When they came down, they I remember America was called at the time by its true name. It was called Turtle Island. Turtle Island. That's what it was called, right? And when they came across, they found this tribe of people who turned up. And when they turned up, they greeted one another. And when they greeted, the black guy that was with him understood what he said. He said, "What are they saying?" Right. And he said, "They're saying, Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one." And they said it in Hebrew. And he said, how do they know this? He said, because they are the lost people of the tribe of Israel. And it's in this particular book, Lost Tribes and the Promised Land. You should all have a copy of it. It's heavy reading, I will admit. It's heavy reading. So if you're not into reading, it's more scholarly, but it's worth the read. Because the gems that keep smashing you in the face as you read it, you keep on reading to find another gem. That's how exciting it is. It is an exciting read for those of you that like that. I can't find it, but we're going to revisit this anyway, because we're going to be doing some study breakdowns on it. Now, so back to the point, your question. Our language has been spoken. It never was not spoken. But finally, in the captivity of 1619, that was when the work was done to completely obliterate it from the minds of those who were slaves. And that's why, as I said, I mean, this teaching, we're not doing a proper version of it. We're only touching it today. You'll understand partly why they took slaves from the Africans, brought them over to the Americas where our people were, beat it out of these so that they could mix with the ones who are here to change them from speaking their tongue. Then took those who were already here who spoke the Hebrew and take them back to Europe and obliterated out of their minds and then put them back into their African countries. I'm telling you, Esau, he's a master at destroying. That's why the scripture says he's the border of wickedness. You see? So, but again, we'll prove all of this. I mean, I'm in no hurry. Yahweh hasn't come back yet. So we got time on our hands, and it makes exciting studies as we go along. All right? And again, for those who would be naysayers who said, you're not teaching Bible, you're teaching history. Well, the Bible is a book of history. That shows how much you know. Because if you knew the Bible, you'd understand that it is. It's our history. All right? So we'll get to break it down even the more. Now, let's take it a step further. Read on, sir, go to the next clause and read on, if you please.
The Black Assyrians of the Bible. It has been recorded that the Black Assyrians were confederate with the Scythian king Baratoa in 700 BC.
Now, by the way, make a note of the name of the Syrians and the date, because if you don't make a note of the two, when you Google it, you won't get the information you're looking for. Because Google is so good, if you come up with a name, they give you another date. I've noticed that too about Google. You think you're smart, Google, but we got your number. All right, so continue. Question?
Could you repeat that date?
Let's repeat it again. Read
the
it,
date in 700 BC.
In fact, read it from the top, if you please, sir.
It has been recorded that the Black Assyrians were confederate with the Scythians.
All right, now Scythians, spell that out so everyone has the right spelling.
SCYTHIAN. Continue. King Baratoa in 700 BC.
700 BC. Continue.
But that the white Scythian barbarians had allied themselves with the Medes and Persians and destroyed Assyria. This was written in the Old Testament where Nebuchadnezzar invaded and destroyed the Assyrian Empire.
Good. Now, the reason why you have to be careful here is because in the history, they will not make any note of the scriptural reference. They give their own archaeology reference, and the archaeology reference is incorrect because you have to get the reference of the scriptures, because the scriptures is the truest continual date line in history because of the way that it's broken down. Now, some will confuse you and try to say, oh, but my Bible doesn't read that way. No, because it's written in books put together. To get the proper understanding, you have to then go to what's known as a chronological Bible. And if you read that, it puts it all in chronology. And that way you get the proper time dates correctly. And those Bibles, by the way, are good for references to study, because if you get confused, well, when did this happen, and how did it happen over here, and what happened there? That's what it does. It puts it in perspective for you. Khan? All right. So just bear that in mind. And in the future, again, as I say, we will put all those things up on the screen and we'll put it parallel so you can read it one to another to see how it all falls in line. Khan? Continue, please, sir.
The Scythian barbarians had aligned themselves with the Medes and Persians and destroyed Assyria. This was written in the Old Testament where Nebuchadnezzar invaded and destroyed the Assyrian Empire. The Bible didn't tell us that it was the white Assyrian Empire. The Bible did not, Salaki. The Bible didn't tell us that it was the white Scythians. It simply said Nebuchadnezzar, the Chaldean, and the Bible never told us that Nebuchadnezzar, whites, were confederate with the Medes and Persians. Timeline 700 BC.
Now, to get full understanding of that, you have to read from Daniel chapter 1 through to Daniel chapter 5. Daniel chapter 1, and you have to continually read through to Daniel chapter 5 to get correct understanding. Con? Continue, please.
Attila the Hun. In 450 AD, there was a brown-skinned man of the name of Attila the Hun who crossed the Volga with his warriors. Attila was so feared by the white barbarians.
Now let's stop. Let's put in some history in that so that you can understand. Now, during the time of Attila the Hun, it uses the word brown skin. Now, in many of the movies you will see about Attila the Hun, you'll always see Attila the Hun looking like a Japanese or Chinese man. Now, what you have to bear in mind is that a group of our people who, and some of their descendants still live in Africa today. When you see them, they live in the continent of Africa. I can't remember what country in Africa right now, but their eyes are slanty. And these are the ancestral people of those who migrated and went away and lived in those areas. They were dark-skinned, brown-skinned people. And they were the ascendants of Moab and Ammon. And so when they lived in those areas, they became mongrels. And by the way, the term mongrel is what Moab and Ammon are. That makes sense to you so far? Now, the reason why people don't like to use that is because today the devil introduced political correctness. And when you use the word political correctness, it's trying to tell you that you can't say that. You're offending people. Well, to the lake of fire with you with that, because you people are still calling the likes of me wogs, niggers, monkeys, and all of that. Now you want me to get all political correct because it offends you. Well, it just so happened that there's a law here, and it's called free speech. And I'm abiding by that law. And so when it comes to the things that we're dealing with here, it helps us to understand that Han grew mightily. The so-called Caucasian races didn't like it, and they had what they call a horde. And they were so big that they ended up overtaking all of the northern sections, what you call today Russia and China. They owned it. And when they were making their way down, because they were going to take over Europe, but it was the will of the Most High that was not part of his plan, so he held them up. But they escaped, the so-called Caucasians escaped and went into other nations. And they regrouped themselves. And that's why, and let me see if I can build a picture. If you have a group here and a group there and a group there and a group there, they're splintered, right? They're factions. In order for them, the Most High wanted them to come together, right? And the only way you can get them together is to send Attila with his hands to come and put fear in them and let them gather together. That's why today we have a collective group of people called Caucasians, because they were forced together. The Most High God used the force of him to make them come together, and then the rest we'll explain as we go along. Continue.
Attila was so feared by the white barbarians, Jehusi, Bactri, Scythian, Saka, Saga, Tocharian, Vandals, Goths, Ostrogoths, Lombards, Anglo, and Saxon, that a migration of whites flooded into the Roman Empire seeking refuge from Attila. This great migration of whites into the black mixed Holy Roman Empire.
Now, here is the next part. It says, read that letter close again.
Into the black mixed Holy Roman Empire has been.
Now, the Holy Roman Empire, it was called that because of Septimius Severus. Septimius Severus. He was the gladiator that took over Rome and became emperor. Remember, black slave who was put in to kill lions for entertainment for Rome recognized that with 50 of us who they brought here to be killed, each one of us can kill five to even 8 of their men, no problem. Yes. That means if 5 of them came to one man, not a problem. Now if it's 10, I'm going to work a little bit more, but 5 is no problem. And so what happened was, if you imagine that now, their forces and ability was greater. They went and they overtook Rome, and they ushered in what's called the Holy Roman Empire. That's where it came from. See, that's where it came from. These black slaves who were gladiators brought in the Holy Roman Empire. And they called it holy because they were trying to bring some of their Judaism in with it, the Jewish customs in with it, but it couldn't mix because oil and water doesn't mix. So they brought in a archetype version. Now, when we read on, if you please, go on the Holy Roman Empire, continue.
The Holy Roman Empire has been deliberately taught incorrectly by the so-called educational institutions in this country.
Read.
When these white barbarians invaded Rome, the sheer number of these invading white barbarians caused the western leg of the Roman Empire to collapse. When the white barbarians invaded the Roman Empire, the mulatto people were displaced, and according to the eyewitness of that generation, this is the point in history when whites populated Europe.
Now, the mulattoes were those who were of mixed descent. Okay? So, continue with that last part you read. Go on, sir.
In history, when whites populated Europe, the Apostle Peter mentions the Scythians in Colossians 3 and 11. And based on the ancient maps, they appear to have resided north of the Black Sea, but other than that, it appears that the rest of the white community dwelt in Asia.
Right. So, what you have when you read the scriptures, when you read your Bible and you're reading Hebrews, you're reading Thessalonians, you're reading Philippians, you're reading Ephesians, Galatians, Corinthians. Now, you're reading about where our people populated greatly. Now, we were there by the droves. You, unfortunately, have had it the wrong way around. You're thinking, well, this is where the majority of them were Caucasians, and we were like sprinkles in there. No. Let me repeat. You were there predominantly. They came, conquered you, and controlled you. Now, how can I prove this? Let me use some history to help you understand that. It was later on that Constantine changed up the order of things and moved the capital of Rome out of Rome into where? You all know this, of course. What was the place that Constantine called his headquarters? Named after his name. Constantinople. It became the new Rome. Now, picture it, please. Romans, so-called Caucasian Romans now, were leaving Rome and living abroad in these other areas, and began to slowly take over the areas because they were controlling it. It's like someone taking over a country, and eventually everyone keeps coming to the country. Good case in point. Let's say the Chinese decide to come to America in the droves. After a while, you see nothing but Chinese. Now, you know they weren't here before, but now all of a sudden they're here by the droves. And not only that, they're mixing with the people. So now you're seeing Caucasians looking, you look, okay. And then you're seeing them mixed with blacks and all the rest. And then everyone start bearing the stigma or the scar of the Chinese by having the slanty eyes. And that's what you'll find across when any country that's been taken over, you find the predominant race who's in charge slowly taking it over. And that's history, folks. To the spoils, or to the conqueror goes the spoils. So continue, sir. Read on.
450 AD, when whites appeared in Europe. When dealing with
Write the date down, because you're going to need to make a reference point. 450 AD, when the so-called whites appeared in Europe. Because remember, before that, they were Asiatic. They lived in Asia. They lived over that side. And they lived there enough that that's why you'll find the so-called Chinese, who were dark-skinned people, went from being dark-skinned people, the Chinese, to being basically almost white-skinned people now. And the only ones who look dark are the ones who are still living in the interior that you don't see. It's like when you go to El Salvador. El Salvador's a black country, but you never see the face of El Salvador with a black man or woman. You'll always see it with those who are Caucasian. Argentina, it's a black country, by the way.
Yes.
When you go there, black people all over the place. Guess what? When they represent films or whatever, they never show a black face anywhere. How would that be? My country, you don't see me there? That's like the country. Like we're going to make a film over in Jamaica. Not one of the people you see in Jamaica are black. They're all white. How do you do that? But you do it because you are in control. You can change the narrative. Read on.
450 AD, when whites appeared in Europe. When dealing with financial markets, huge amounts of information is gathered and analyzed to determine trends in the marketplace. This information is analyzed to determine what marketing approach to take or what segment of the population will the corporation pitch in order to sell its products. This is what I have attempted to do in our research on the footsteps of the white man. Based on the available date, it appears that he first stepped foot in Europe in the 5th century.
Make a note of that, the 5th century. That's important. And by the way, in case anyone else gets confused, Constantine was not a white man. He was a black man. Yeah, thought that would be surprising. Constantine was, in fact, he was a Jake. That shows you how messed up he was. That's why the scripture speaks about wicked Jakes. And that's why when you read First Maccabees, it speaks, in fact, just hold your horses for a moment. Let's go. Yes, sir. Let's go to First Maccabees chapter 1 and verse 11, and then we're going to move on a little bit. Would you please?
It's in the Apocrypha, First Maccabees, chapter 1 and verse 10. Chapter 1 and verse 10, it reads, "And there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, son of Antiochus the king, who had been in hostage at Rome, and he reigned in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks.
Go on.
In those days went there out of Israel wicked men who persuaded many, saying,
Hold it. Read that again in case somebody kind of missed it.
in those days
In those days,
went there out of Israel wicked men who persuaded many, saying, let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us. For since we departed from them, we have had much sorrow.
much sorry. Hold that. Jump to chapter 2 Maccabees chapter 4 and read, if you please, verse. Read, for time purposes, read verse 9 and 10, and then jump to 15.
Come. 2 Maccabees chapter 4 and verse 9. Beside this, he promised to ensign 150 more, if he might have license to set him up a place of exercise, and for the training up of youth in the fashions of the heathens, and to write them of Jerusalem by the name of Antiochus.
So he's doing it. He set this all up that the Greek fashions can be displayed in Jerusalem. Continue.
Verse 10, which when the king had granted, and he had gotten into his hand the rule, he forthwith brought his own nation to the Greekish fashion.
Jump to 15. Read.
Verse 15, not setting by the honors of their fathers, but liking the glory of the Grecians best of all.
Read on.
By reason whereof sore calamity came upon them, for they had them to be their enemies and avengers, whose custom they followed so earnestly.
Custom they did what?
Followed so earnestly,
Read.
and unto whom they desired to be like in all things.
Chapter 6. Jump to verse 8.
2 Maccabees chapter 6 and verse 8. Moreover, there went out a decree to the neighbor cities of the heathen by the suggestion of Ptolemy against the Jews, that they should observe the same fashions and be partakers of their sacrifices.
So you could see how we became completely and totally indoctrinated. Khan? All right. So back to yourself, soldier.
450 AD, when white appears in Europe, that he first stepped foot in Europe in the 5th century during the barbarian invasion of Rome. The whites invaded the western leg of the Roman Empire. It appears that they were unable to infiltrate the eastern leg, Byzantine, of the empire.
Again, you'll find that you will hear them even try to make out that those who were of the Byzantine Empire, that they were white or Turkish. They don't want to say that they were black. And you'll find that they'll push that very, very hard. But if you, and the reasons why you have to be investigative in your discovery is because if you don't, you won't find the artifacts that goes with it. When you look at the Byzantine artifacts, it's all black. If I pull out a statue that has a head on it and it's of the Byzantine Empire, and the face of the Byzantine has curly hair and a curly beard, what are you going to say? And the nose is broad. What are you going to say? I mean, how are you going to get around it? Now, this is how they got around some of it. They chipped off the noses and they mashed the lips to show that there's no distinction there. But you cannot hide archaeology. Yes, question.
So, Pastor, is this general knowledge that Edom knows about globally, or are even some Edomites globally in the dark about this history?
The powers that be know about it. I would say that at least I would say maybe 30 to 40% of Edom knows about this.
That's right.
And I say that because, for instance, this is why people say, you don't ever say anything nice about Obama. No, that's not true. I've said some nice things about Obama. But what I recognize is that when Obama went into power, every president gets a dossier. It's common knowledge. It's a huge book that they have to read it. Their first year, they have to read the whole thing and understand it. In that dossier, there's a lot of history about the people, the origin of the people. Now they'll say, well, what's that got to do with anything? I mean, he's dealing with present days. No, it's important because it's a legacy that's passed on and so on. Now, how do we know this? Because remember, in the scriptures, the Bible says that when a king sat on the throne, a copy of the law was given to him and he had to read the whole thing. It's a tradition that's been passed on. Now, here's the thing that happens. Now, when Obama read it, he knew. Now, I'm speculating mine, but I know that he read it. That I know for a fact. But I'm speculating this part. He knew that what he read wasn't dealing with him. He knew that. So then, why was he going to make a whole lot of shifting and turning for a bunch of people that were never his? You see? Yeah, if you're Hamite, why? I've already got the best of both worlds here. I've got a little bit of this, I've got a little bit of that. And so long as it helps me and my family do what we have to do, so be it. My daughters, they have a legacy. That's it. So that's why, you see, not everyone, not because he looks like me, means he was me.
That's right.
He was playing a part, and a notable part for history. But back to your point, I reckon 30 to 40% of the people of the main movers and shakers of this world, they know this. The rest don't know it. Now, how do we know that? Because when we're out there on the street each week, we have to give a history.
That's true.
Don't we, sir?
Come.
Sometimes he has to stand there and break it all down. And he's over there, open up scriptures and reading the scriptures to show them what he's saying is true.
That's right.
Because they don't know it. And then they're dumbfounded because he's not reading from another book. He's reading from the scriptures first. And then later on, he'll pull out some books like this, and then they'll go, what? I've never seen this before. Because they happen. Why? Because it's not taught in schools. And if it's not taught in schools, guess what? We'll be more in ignorant. And we usually are. We were told who Queen Elizabeth was. And now we understand that the first Queen Elizabeth was of mixed race. And that's why when you see her with that curly, fluffy hair, that was an afro. And if you think old people didn't have an indelible impact on British and European society, then why on earth were they wearing those dresses that had the big behind it and the hips are all out? Well, I mean, which so-called nowadays they can get the injection and to get what they want, but back then there was no injection. So what did they do? Our black women were wearing the dresses and it was flowing nice up there. Yeah. You got to put a break on your brain every now and then in case you go and say something you're not supposed to say. Like this. But here's my point. Our black women looked excellent in their display, whereas they wanted to be like us. And here's a joke. We want to be like them, but they're trying to be like us.
Come.
And they make you hate yourself. Yes, sis.
Yes.
They make you hate yourself so you don't like what you look like. Yet secretly, I got to look like her. Continue, please, sir.
Eastern Leg Byzantine of the Empire.
Okay.
Historically, this is the only information that I would view as reliable, and that being the eyewitness accounts that come to us from ancient Chinese sources, the the grave sites and the eyewitnesses account from the historians of that day.
Read it again, please.
The grave sites,
No, from the top.
okay, Byzantine of the empire. Historically, this is the only information that I would view as reliable, and that being the eyewitness that I would view as reliable, and that being the eyewitness accounts that come to us from ancient Chinese sources.
Mm-hmm.
The grave sites and the eyewitness account from the historians
Now,
of
let me
that
stop
day.
you briefly. Keep your finger there, don't miss it.
Yes, sir.
Because you see, remember, a lot of all these kung fu movies you see, and you see the karate and the
Yes.
kung fu
Yes.
and all of those art methods and the samurai.
Mhm.
Then you wonder, why is it that our people gravitate to that so hard? Our people gravitate to samurai with swords, to karate kicking, and why is it that back in the day in the competition, our people were tearing them up with it?
Yes, God.
Why? Because it originated with our descendants. You see, some of the great shoguns, they were black men who would die for their king. You see, all of these things are not taught because most of the movies they don't show a black-skinned samurai. Yet the original samurai was indeed a black man.
Yes.
And the original samurai who folded the blades 50 or the metal 50 times to make it seriously hard. They can cut through trees, and you could cut a cow in half with one strike. It was a black man who made this up.
Come.
Now here's the joke. Isn't it something that the Spirit of the Lord would come on you, that you regenerate and come back, and you're seeing some things that you invented or created, and you don't even know it was you
Yes, amazing.
because you can't remember a thing about it. So it's amazing when we begin to explore this and examine it in more detail. Now, and remember what it says. It says that the bones and the artifacts proved it, because remember, how do you know the difference between a black man and a so-called Caucasian? The nasal passages are wider than the narrowness of a Caucasian. And we're different in terms of our forehead versus his. Our frontal lobe is different from the back section of our head, is different from theirs. So even when they turn around and they're trying to make it Caucasian, but we can't. Because when we start to put plaster of Paris on it to build it up, it starts looking like a black nose, and we don't want it to. Why do you think with that was it Napatilia? That they showed it, and they in the end they really rubbished that. They ended up painted the original, and that was in Cairo, was of a dark brown skinned woman. Then on this American program they said that this is the head, we reformulated it, and this is as near of an exact example as possible. And here's the thing: now they show her skin looking white. How that be? How that be? It cannot happen because, or should I say, it happened because they made it happen, but it's not true in terms of what they produce. Continue, sir.
Eyewitness accounts from the historians of that day who saw the traveling whites and described them. Is this any way a knock against the whites and his origins? No. This is an attempt to figure out once and for all, who are these people and where did they come from? It appears that from the information that we have analyzed, that not only did the white man enter Western Europe in the 5th century, this also puts a time frame on the event of the white popes.
Okay, so whilst he's turning to that, bear this in mind as well, that the original popes, there was no such thing as an original white pope. The original popes were black men. Continue.
To the top right-hand corner of this map, you should see the Sagna and the Bactria. Bactria, this is where the word bacteria has its origins. These were the white tribes, and their location was on the outskirts of ancient Iran and Iraq. Now, Peter mentions the Scythians as the barbarian tribes. It is possible that he was using the word Scythian to accommodate all the white tribes. I cannot say for sure. One thing that I am certain of is this. There was a time when parts of Africa, Libya, was uninhabited. Below the Sahara Desert before the great Bantu Hebrew migration of possibly 100 million people, and it appears that Europe was in the same condition. Based on the eyewitnesses' account and the artifacts that are emerging from the ground, it appears that the earth had a slow population growth up to the times of the apostles. Even though this section does not deal with Africa, Libya, if you go back and look at the ancient maps around 1000 BC, you will notice that the ancient cartographers around map makers didn't show any nation inhabiting West Africa below Ethiopia. Mm-hmm. Think about this. Think about it. This is the reason that this section is important. Everybody on this planet has a right to know the truth about their history. I want to reiterate this point that I am not interested in this concept of racism that prevails in this country. I am only interested in the rewriting of history based on the facts. It appears that most of Europe was uninhabited outside of the Romanized nations. Timeline 450 AD. The Kurgan hypothesis, this is generally accepted view of the beginnings of the white race. This hypothesis was formulated by Marija Gimbutas. The view held that all whites had their beginnings in Central Asia and that the Indo-Euro language evolved in the Northwest region.
Correct. Go on.
What are we to conclude from this information? When the white barbarians entered the western leg of the Roman Empire, the blacks and the mulattoes was already there. The oldest skeleton and have been found in Europe were of black people. How do I know this? When the Creator created the black man, he gave him a large nasal passage. That's why our noses are so big. The whites, on the other hand, have a pointed nasal passage. That's why their noses are so pointed. So when you examine a skeleton in a grave site, you can determine whether the person was white or black, even though he has no skin.
Come
on.
Continue.
Advent of the white popes. I was always puzzled by the appearance of these white popes in history. And since I had no one to teach me where and when they appeared on the scene, it was always remained a mystery until I took a closer look at the invasion of the western leg of the Roman Empire. If you take a close look at the map, you will see Roman Italy before the invasions of the white barbarians. Look up. Up to this point in history, Italy is not divided between black and white. Popes, because white barbarians have not invaded Rome. That's a fact.
Come. Any questions so far? Continue.
Rome before invasions of the white barbarians. Rome after white invasions, barbarian invasions, the white barbarian Ostrogoths are now in Italy.
Skip that.
Only two.
Yeah, go ahead.
Take a closer look at the map, and you will see that after the white barbarians, Lombards and Ostrogoths.
Now, Lombards was a group of people. The Ostrogoths was where we get the word Goths today. There was another group of people that were called the Vandals, where we get the word vandalism from. Because, again, these were so-called white groups. That's why when we have the word they was where those people where we get the word bacteria from, because they were germ-ridden people that they carried germs with them everywhere. You see, and that's why there was a scorning from the so-called black races to the so-called Caucasian race. But it's amazing how today they've done such a good job
Yes.
of making that attractive that every so-called people want to be white and not realizing that what you want to be carries a history of germs with it. Continue.
Invaded Italy. The black Byzantine priest who had been keeping the Sabbath moved residence and set up Byzantine Italy. These are the facts, ladies and gentlemen. The Ostrogoths and the Lombards were white barbarians, and they set up shop in Italy after the barbarian invasions. They cannot deny this. Where does the Pope reside? History teaches you that the black popes of Abidjan moved their residence from Italy in 1309.
Make a note of that.
Between 1377 to France.
Continue.
This information is historical and indisputable. This may be the point in time when the white popes took their dominion in Italy. The earliest date that we can put on this advent of it or invention of the white popes would have to be 450 AD, and the latest would be 1309 AD. I'm going with the 450 AD because generally, when people migrate as a whole, they take everything with them, including their priests. Consider the simplicity of this question that I'm about to ask you. If the black popes moved to Avignon, who was in Italy, it's simple. The white popes, this is supported by history and the maps that I have provided you. This was a point in history where Italy was divided between the black popes from the eastern leg of the Byzantine Empire and the white barbarians Lombard popes, who invaded the empire with the barbarian migration.
And so when they invaded them, they pushed aside those who were Byzantine, and they introduced their own. And so now we have a whole new stage set with same pope name, but difference in appearance.
Yeah.
Continue.
These are the facts. This would mean that when the white barbarians overran the Holy Empire, Roman Empire, they actually overran the church. Before I leave this section, I need to leave you with a little known historical fact of great significance. When Constantine convened the Nicene Council, 323 AD, to change the Sabbath day from Saturday to Sunday, the British priests were the only ones not to attend.
Now, who can say why the British priests, the British leg of the religiosity didn't turn up? Why do you think that? I've told you this in the past. I've dropped some keys in the past. What does the word Brit means? No, not black. Brit. Yes, it deals with covenant. Brit. Deals with covenant. They were covenant people. Why were they covenant? Because the original people of Great Britain were not Caucasian, not white. They were black people. They kept the covenant. So they didn't turn up. And that angered Constantine because that means they weren't going to follow the rules that he had set. And that's why for years later, the Brits continued to honor the Sabbath. Yes.
Like the baby's breast. You have the baby's breast.
Yes.
Probably comes from that too. They circumcise the baby.
Yes, indeed. Now, explain that some more because so people don't know what you're talking about.
In Jewish culture, the baby has a breast it's a circumcision on the 8th day.
Yeah.
And so that's covenant.
Correct. But remember, it was all changed a little because it started to become, pardon me if you use the term if it offends some, it became bastardized. Why? Because they started to bring in sexual deviancy to it. That's why the priest who would do it, he would suck the penis, you see, and all of the baby, you see, and sometimes give the babies gonorrhea and all of that because it was in their mouth. So, so there's a whole lot. That's why I was anxious to see where you were going, because there's a whole lot more to that than what meets the eye, and maybe we can, if you give me permission and you want me grossed out, I'll actually show you some video down the road where you can actually see this and see how the baby was, and then how the baby inflamed up after the priest did it, and how some of the babies became eunuchs because of the priest doing what he did. Took away the child's manhood completely. Continue, sir.
The British priests were the only ones not to attend. There's a reason for this. The word for covenant in Paleo-Hebrew is Brit, B-R-Y-T, or B-R-I-T, which means the original inhabitants of Britain were black Hebrews, Israelites. See the testimony of the European themselves.
And by the way, this is on display in Britain. And that's a joke. In Britain and in France, Russia and Germany and Italy, there is displays that show us in our position, yet we walk on by like it don't, because we're not taught it. They've got it right in the museum. I mean, when I took my kids to the museum, and I'm standing there explaining it to Jessica and Mill. They were young at the time, and a crowd started to gather around whilst I'm explaining this. But I'm explaining to my children what this is, what this particular thing is. And you know, white people, they stand to the side like they're not listening, but they're listening.
They listen, yes. Come.
Go ahead, sir.
You see the testimony of the European themselves. African presence in early Europe. Ivan Sertima, New Brunswick translation, publishes 2007, page 225. The Britons, B-R-Y-T, look like the Ethiopians. There was a black exodus out of Western Europe into the eastern leg of the Roman Byzantine Empire by the clergy and the weak. The rest of the brothers stood their ground until at least 1780 AD, when the Black Plague, black people were deported or exterminated.
Right. Now, that's part of history, again, that you're not exposed to. When we were young, and again, I had to have my sister here who had some of that education, bears witness to it. When they spoke about the Black Plague, they were speaking about a particular type of disease. The Black Plague was us, who they didn't want in the country anymore. So what they did was they shipped us out, our people out. They did the same thing to Ireland. They shipped the original Irish people, they shipped them to Barbados. That's why when you see a Barbadian, you'll see normally that he has a slightly Irish yet West Indian accent. It's quite kind of cute, special when you hear it. But the beauty is what it was doing, it was showing the history of how they have destroyed us by taking us out of lands that we owned originally. And remember, just in case you have it confused, it had to happen because it's scripture. The scripture says, everywhere that the soles of our feet would trod, we would own. Everywhere. And guess what? Israel has been everywhere. Everywhere. You name it, we've been there. All right, finish that up, sir.
Benjamin Franklin's letter, titled America as a Land of Opportunity. Author, Benjamin Franklin. Year, 1751. Subject, why increase the sons of Africa in America? Location of this...
Hold it, because you might have gone over people's head. He said, why increase the sons of Africa in America? Meaning that the sons of Africa were already in America.
Yes,
so why bring more of them there?
Yes.
All right, read it again. And this is an actual letter that is on display, by the way, at the Smithsonian Museum. Go ahead.
Subject, why... You want first, sir?
Read from the top all the way down.
Benjamin Franklin's letter, titled America as a Land of Opportunity. Author, Benjamin Franklin. Year, 1751. The subject, why increase the sons of Africa in America. Location of this letter, digital history of the United States. Benjamin Franklin wrote a letter that you can find in digital history of the United States under the title that is listed above. In the letter, Benjamin Franklin laments and complained the fact that the black Europeans, swarthy or Twani, inhabited Germany.
Swarthy.
Swarthy.
And Thwani, it actually means black or dark skin.
Yes.
Go on.
Inhabit Germany, Spain, England, France, Russia, Sweden, and Italy. He further goes on to...
By the way, did you get that? That's where all our people inhabited. We were everywhere. Continue, sir.
He further goes on to question the crown in Britain on why they are sending the sons of Africa, the black Britons, to America. What further proof do I need? We are in the desperate need of a congressional hearing on the history that is being taught in the United States. In fact, this is an international problem because the entire world has been taught history upside down. Get it? The racial divide in the United States. To be honest with you, I have been finished with this book probably 2 times, but recent events in the United States between the blacks and the white have precipitated that another section gets added to the book. The event that has delayed the publishing of this book is the Michael Brown assassination in Ferguson, Missouri. I call it an assassination because the young man was shot 2 times in the head and 4 times to his body, while his hands were up, while he was on his knees, and while he was unarmed. Sounds familiar. The scenes continue to play out in the cities of America, with white police officers shooting unarmed black men. In New York City, the racist white officer Justin Volpe choked Eric Garner to death for selling, of all things, cigarettes. In New York City, the police rammed a broken wood plunger up the anus of Abner Milleneumn, a Haitian immigrant, and the list goes on and on.
And by the way, there was a video of that, and they were laughing whilst they were doing that. You know, and killed him. He bled to death, and they left it, the plunger in him, videoed it, and guess what? They still got off.
Yes.
They got off. Continue.
In the case of Michael Brown, it galvanized the black community. Conclusion. I presented you the facts as they have emerged from the ground and the eyewitness accounts concerning the Jews in Jerusalem on the day of Pentecost. It is apparent from the artifacts that the Jews that showed up on the day of Pentecost were black, all of them. The seminaries and the churches can't seem to wrap their minds around this singular fact that white people didn't know anything about God or his people. That's right. God said, "You alone have I known," that's in Amos 3:2, "of all peoples of the earth. Go and ask from one end of the heaven to the next." Deuteronomy 4:31 through 36. Did any nation hear the voice of God from heaven and live? Or has God taken a nation from another nation unto himself?
Stop. Let's read Amos, and then we'll go to Deuteronomy. So we keep things in context.
This is the book of Amos, chapter 3 and verse 1. Hear this word that the Most High have spoken against you, O children of Israel,
Read.
against the whole family which I brought up from the land of Egypt, saying, you only have I known of all the families of the earth. Therefore, I will punish you for all your iniquities. Is that Deuteronomy chapter 4? Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 31. It reads, "For the Most High, thy power is merciful, God. He will not forsake thee, neither destroy thee, nor get thee the covenant of thy fathers which he sware unto them,
All right, let's leave that. Finish it, please, Soldier, and then we'll wrap up.
Since they weren't part of the church and God didn't know them, who would have invited them? This is another great lie that you hear daily in the churches, that the Gentiles took over the church on the day of Pentecost.
Now, isn't it something? They weren't part of the church, they weren't invited, but somehow they introduced themselves. Go on.
When it is apparent that there was not one Gentile, white person, present, not one. The letters written to Galatia, Thessalonica, Ephesians, Corinthians, and Colossae, and the Byzantine of Rome were written to the black Jews that were present in the Byzantine realm. Salah.
Salah. Any questions on that? Let's just finish up with a couple of scriptures which I think you need to keep in mind. I want you to go to 2nd Ezra, chapter 4 and 13. Go ahead and read.
2nd Ezra, chapter 4 and verse 13, it reads, He answered me and said, I went into a forest, into a plain, and the trees took counsel.
And the trees took counsel. That ties in with Genesis chapter 3 and 8. You remember the account in Genesis chapter 3 when they messed up and they ran and hid themselves.
Yes, sir.
All right, so begin at 7.
Genesis chapter 3 and verse 7. And the eyes of them both were opened,
Read.
and they knew that they were naked. And they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves aprons.
Read.
And they heard the voice of the Most High Power walking in the garden in the cool of the day. And Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Most High amongst the trees.
Amongst where?
Amongst the trees of the garden.
Now, when that's you're reading that, it's really saying that they took counsel. That's when you go back to 2nd Ezra chapter 4 and 13 and read it again.
2nd Ezra chapter 4 and verse 13. He answered me and said, I went into a forest, into a plain, and the trees took counsel.
Got that, ladies and gentlemen? So let's finish it off with 2nd Ezra chapter 4 and 23.
2nd Ezra chapter 4 and verse 23. For it was not my mind to be curious of the high things, but of such as pass by us daily, namely, wherefore Israel is given up as a reproach to the heathen.
Read.
And for what cause the people whom thou hast loved is given over unto ungodly nations.
So the ungodly nations is Esau.
Good.
And remember, Esau comes in many facets, so don't underestimate it. That's why today, remember, when the soldier was reading, he named all of the different cities where Jacob was.
That's right.
In those cities, you have a question?
Could you repeat the scripture again?
The scripture, 2nd Ezra chapter 4 and 23. All right. What you'll find that in all of those cities where Jacob was, you'll notice that they all today are inhabited by Caucasians. All of them. England, Caucasian. Russia, Caucasian. Germany, Caucasian. Sweden, Caucasian. Italy, Caucasian. France, Caucasian. Spain, all of them now have been inhabited by Caucasians,
Right.
calling themselves Spanish, British, French, Italians, German, Russian, Swedish, etc. But they're all one people.
That's right.
Esau. Esau. And when the Most High comes and he takes Esau out of the scheme of things, you will begin to see then that all of those countries will be empty from them.
That's right.
Leaving it then open for Jake to develop as to how it seemed fit by the Most High. Now, remember, there are those who will say, well, hold on a moment. But the scripture says that the nations will go back to their nations and develop their nations back and then pay tribute. Yes, indeed. But remember, Esau has disguised himself and taken on pseudonyms.
That's right.
The pseudonym that they took on was not who they really were. It's just a name they put on just to get by. But the real nations are Turkey, the Grecians. Are you getting this? The Saudi Arabians. Those are the real nations, because those are the nations that you read about in the scriptures. And if you want to get an even more clarity of it, then you go to Acts chapter 2. And in Acts chapter 2, as we conclude, it says there, because they're wondering who are these people who spoke. So if you go, Acts chapter 2 and verse 5, we'll begin there, read.
Acts chapter 2 and verse 5. And there were dwelling at Jerusalem Jews, devout men, out of every nation under heaven.
So we were out of every nation under heaven, which proves the point that yes, we were in Britain. Yes, we were in Germany, Italy, France, wherever. It says so here. It says out of every nation under the heaven. Read, sir.
Deuteronomy chapter 28 and verse 64. And the Most High shall scatter thee among all people, from the one end of the earth even unto the other. And there thou shalt serve other gods, which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, even wood and stone.
Come on. See that?
Yes.
And so when we go back now to Acts and we read, if you please, go on.
Acts
Verse
chapter
6.
2 and verse 6. Now, when this was noised abroad, the multitude came together and were confounded, because that every man heard them speak in his own language.
Showing you that out of all the people on the earth, Israel has a propensity for language.
God.
We just do. Put us anywhere, we'll speak the language.
God.
In no time flat, we'll speak the language. Read on, sir.
And they were all amazed and marveled, saying one to another, Behold, are not all these which speak Galileans?
See that? Go on.
And how hear we, every man, in our own tongue, wherein we were born?
Because the Most High put the Spirit on us that we could speak the language to our people who were born in those countries and have come back to Jerusalem to celebrate the feast. Read.
Parthians and Medes.
See, Medes. Remember, we read about the Medes who were with the Persians.
God.
That's right.
See, so you can see how we've been infiltrated into those different groups. Go on.
And Elamites.
Elamites. Those are what we call today East Indians. Go on.
And the dwellers of Mesopotamia.
Mesopotamia. Go on.
And in Judea. And Cappadocia. In Pontus and Asia.
And Asia. Go on. Asia dealing with those who are Chinese and more of descent. Go on.
Phrygia and Pamphylia. In Egypt and in the parts of Libya. About Cyrene and strangers of Rome, Jews and proselytes.
Read.
Cretes and Arabians, we do hear them speak in our tongues the wonderful works of the Most High. And they were all amazed and were in doubt, saying one to another, What meaneth this?
Right, we'll stop that.
God.
All right. So this is just a cursory view that we have done today. And I hope it has helped to open up your mind a little to see where the wicked came from. We dealt with that. We gave a brief foundation of that. I've done it several times with you, and I hope that you can that you can explain it, because we've done it a series of times. But then you see the spin-off from that, where Esau ended up going through the world, disguising himself to take over and become a part of the landmass because he wanted the real estate. But remember, it's been in his heart that he wants to kill. It's all, and kill who? The sons of Jacob, who is his brother. And if you want proof of that, all you got to do is to read chapter 27. Chapter 27, we're just going to read just one verse of that, and we're just going to read verse 30 and 31.
Genesis chapter 27 and verse 30.
For time purpose, just make it 31, 32, and 33.
Verse 31. And he also had made savory meat and brought it unto his father, and said unto his father.
My bad. 20. What verse were you reading, sir?
That was 31.
31. Read, if you please, verse, because of time. Yes, 41, 42, and 43.
Come. Genesis chapter 27, verse 41. And Esau hated Jacob.
That's it.
Because of the blessing wherewith his father blessed him. And Esau said in his heart, the days of mourning for my father are at hand. Then will I slay my brother Jacob.
Notice, he said it then. It has never left his lips. Read on.
And these words of Esau, her elder son, were told to Rebekah. And she sent and called Jacob, her younger son, and said unto him, behold, thy brother Esau, as touching thee, doth comfort himself, purposing to kill thee.
Right, so meaning it's his intention to do that. So that's what he has intended to do, and he continues to do it today. Nothing has changed. Salah. Any questions from anyone? Yes.
Online, they would like the official title of the book that Brother Johnny was
The
reading.
official title of the book, just pass it over for me, please. Right. The official title of the book, it's called The Negro Question Part 3, Black Pentecost. The Negro Question Part 3, The Black Pentecost. It's by a gentleman by the name of Lee Cummins. He's what you would call an investigative journalist. He's not a journalist, but he has become one by the efforts that he's put into discovering information. And by the way, there are several of these books. I have several of them, and I send them out a lot. So when I say a lot, whenever the request is being asked, I get them and I send them to people so that they can go ahead and read them and study, because the information in it is very, very good. Now, how do I know that? How do you know it's good? Because I tied in with some of the other books that I have that are official librarian books, and the information that he has written ties in with what I already have. Okay, so you know it's good information. It's a good work. Any other questions? Yes, of course. You could take a copy of it more closer if you wish in a moment. All right. So it's a very good writer.
Yes, it is.
And he let me see. Yeah, I pretty much have all of his books, and I think there's about 5 or 6 of them that he has, and they're all very, very good. And here's the other thing as well. He gives the book names and their pages and where he got them. He bought some in France, he bought some in Italy, and so on. So he's traveled a bit to get the information. All right. Any other questions? Go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
Question online. In Genesis 26, Esau took Canaanite wives. How did he proceed to reproduce Caucasian children?
All right. Esau took Canaanite wives, is that correct? All right. And the question is, how did he produce?
How did he proceed to reproduce Caucasian children?
All right. from what we were reading this morning. Remember what we were just reading this morning? I think we read some things offline before we went on. So he would have missed out on that. So we can give him that information. Let's go back and read about Esau. So again? No, the one. I'm ambling because I want to see who remembers the scriptures that I gave. Because I gave you the scriptures showing you who he was.
36.
Say again?
36 and 1?
Yes. Begin reading Genesis chapter 36, beginning at verse 1.
Genesis chapter 36 and verse 1. Now these are the generations of Esau.
So read it again.
These are the generations of Esau.
So it's telling you, these are the generations of Esau. Read.
Who is Edom?
Who is Edom? Jump to 8.
Verse 8.
Hold it, because let's answer his question, because I think that's the thing. Read verse 2.
Verse 2. Esau took his wives of the daughters of Canaan.
Yes.
Adah, the daughter of Elon, the Hittite, and Elibama, the daughter of Anah, the daughter of Zebah, the Hivite.
Jump to 6.
Verse 6. And Esau took his wives, and his sons, and his daughters, and all the persons of his house, and his cattle, and all his beasts, and all his substance, which he had got in the land of Canaan, and went into the country from the face of his brother Jacob.
All right. So jump to 8, read 8 and 9, and then we'll go flow more into the question of our brother.
Verse 8. Thus dwelt Esau in Mount Seir. Esau is Edom. And these are the generations of Esau, the father of the Edomites in Mount Seir.
So if you jump now to the kings of Edom, you're going to go to verse 31, and you're going to read verse 31 through to verse pretty much to the end, because it lists all the dukes of Edom. So read verse 31 first, and then read verse 43, and then I'll point our brother in another direction. I'm not going to attempting to reteach everything, because his point is valid, and I want to give him certain information that he can go and read and look up for himself. The answer is self-explanatory. Read 31 and then go and read 43.
Genesis chapter 36, verse 31. And these are the kings that reigned in the land of Edom, before there reigned any king over the children of Israel. Verse 43. Duke Magdiel, Duke Aram, these be the dukes of Edom, according to their habitations, and in the land of their possession. He is Esau, the father of the Edomites.
Now, the reason why it keeps on pushing that is to let you know there's no escaping this. He is who he is, right? Now, let's go to Numbers 24 and 20.
The book of Numbers, chapter 24 and verse 20. It reads, And when he looked on Amalek, he took up his parable and said, Amalek was the first.
Was what?
Was the first of the nations.
Was what?
Was the first of the nations.
Go on.
But his latter end shall be that he perish forever.
Perish forever. Okay, so it's, and again, if you want to, and again, if he's going to, if he wants further answers, he's got to learn to follow the scriptures, and then follow the names of who the individuals are and where and whom they married, right? Now, the easiest way to do it, the real easy way to do it, There is a book that's called All, All, All series. And what it covers is all the prophets, all the dreams, all the prophecies, all the names, all the women of the scriptures. It's an all series, it's a volume of books. I have them. So it makes life a lot easier when it comes to looking up certain things. So if you want to look at all the names of Esau's sons and who they married and how it affected their bloodline and changed and so on, when you read the all series, it breaks it all down nicely with that. You might be able to get the volumes online, maybe get a digital version of it. That's fine too. The reason why I don't like digital is because you can change the information. Hard copy, it is what it is. Okay. Any other questions from anyone else? Any questions here? Any more questions online? All right. Okay, I hope that this has been insightful and a blessing to those of you that are online. I hope that you have learned today. I know it's a lot to take in, but the scripture says, study to show thyself approved. A workman need not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. So long as you're dividing the word of truth and you're studying, you will get the answers that you're looking for. And some things, by the way, it's better to study to find it as opposed to have it given to you, because you'll find in that search, it leads you to so many different and other things that then your world opens up. This is why when you study, you'll always find yourself variating and you have to be disciplined to stay on track. All right. So on the behalf of us who are here in the Houston area, and we hope that you've been blessed by this Hebrew teaching and the history of the scriptures and how we fall into line with it. We hope you've been blessed. On the behalf of Soldier Johnny, or Johanna, and Officer Dwayne and myself, we say Shalom.
Shalom.
And Barakatah Yahweh, Yahweh Bashem, Yahweh Shai. Salam.